Chapter 10, we're calculating our markup. So if you work in a retail environment and you are pricing your product, this would be a very relevant business computation for you. And there's two basic formulas that you want to remember. And that is our selling price is equal to our cost plus our markup. And then our markup is a percent times our cost in section 1. And then you'll see when we get into section 2, it's going to be a percent times our selling price. So then those are ones that you're just going to want to read careful. Pay attention to what that markup is on. And then you can read these problems, and maybe you'll initially be able to start with this formula and then solve, or maybe you'll have to start with this one. So you want to understand them both and then be able to read the word problem and figure out which one do I apply. So let's go to an example. If we have Fairfield Tractor put a markup of 32% on cost. So when I read that, 32% on cost tells me it's my percent times the cost for a part which it paid $73.50. So the price that the company pays is their cost. The price that we pay as consumers is the selling price, but the price the company pays is going to be their cost. And then it asks us to calculate out our selling price and our markup. So we can do that. So we can start here with our markup. Our markup is going to be, the problem tells us 32% or 0.32 times our cost, and our cost is $73.50. So then I can just do the math of that. And you can use your percent key on your calculator or turn it into a decimal. So if I take 0.32 times 73.5, I get a markup of $23.52. So that was one of the questions it asked. Then it said, okay, well, what is the actual selling price? So then I go back to this formula, and I say, okay, my selling price is my cost plus markup. I know my cost is $73.50. I just calculated my markup to be $23.52. So I just add those together. So my selling price is $97.02. Okay, then it gets into, there's a variety of those, kind of working them out. You got to read them carefully because it's going to ask for different things. So be able to read those carefully, but then you just revert back to those formulas. Then you can get into ones that break the markup into two different components, so that our markup covers operating expenses or operating costs and provides for net profit. So that is included in our markup. So then you can have ones that word it that way. So say, for instance, we have a discount store purchased amplified cordless phones at a cost of $576. If it needs a 20% of cost to cover the operating expenses and a 15% of cost for net profit, what is the selling price of that phone? So again, both of those percentages have to be covered. So in this example, they have a 20% for operating expenses that they need to cover of their costs, and then they also have a 15%. What they're hoping to have is a 15% of cost coming back to them in net profit. So we've got a 35% markup. So then you have to be able to read those and understand that we add those two together. Then you can go back to your formula though to say, okay, my markup is going to be equal to my cost, which it told us was $576 times our 35%. So then you just do the math of that. $576 cost times 0.35 or 35% gives us a markup of $201.60. And then it also asks for what is our selling price. So again, we can go back to our top formula here. Our selling price is our cost plus our markup. We know that our cost is $576, and we just calculated our markup to be $201.60. So our total price for this package of phones is going to be $777.60. So again, one that you just got to read carefully and understand that. Okay, then we can get into if it just is a markup on selling price. So say we have an example where it says Fry Electronics sells a home theater speaker package for $595. So if that's what they sell it for, that's their selling price. And then it says that it maintains a markup of 35% of selling price. So find the markup and find the cost. So if we start with our second formula, start with our markup. Now in this case it's down here. Our markup, it tells us in the problem, is 35% of the selling price, so that's 0.35. And then it tells us that they sell the speakers for $595. So again, we do the same thing we did, but now the markup is just expressed differently. It's expressed as a percentage of our selling price. But the computation is still the same. It's just what do you multiply it by? Oops. So our markup is $208.25. And then again, we can go back to our top formula, which is our selling price is equal to our cost plus markup. But then now in this case, what we're looking for is our cost. They give us the selling price, the $595 is what they sell these speakers for. We don't know the cost, but we just calculated our markup. So then it's just basic subtraction at that point. So if you take your selling price of $595, subtract out your markup of $208.25, we have a cost of $386.75. So again, very comparable to what we did in that first section, but then now in section 2 it's focused a little bit more on what that selling price is, and then that's how you compute your markup. So read carefully, because when it comes to your test, you're just going to have to read the problems. I mean, you're not going to know what section necessarily those are coming from. Okay, then we have one where we calculate the markup and then we express it as a percent either on cost or on selling price. And this sometimes confuses students. So we have Cycle City advertises mountain bikes for $199.90. And then if their cost is $175 per bicycle, what is our markup on the bicycle? And then what is the percent of that markup on selling price, the percent of that markup on cost? So if we have, going back to our top formula, our selling price is equal to our cost plus our markup. They gave us the selling price of $199.90, and they gave us the cost of $175. So what we're missing is the markup. but we don't know what percentage is, so we can't start with this formula. We have to go back and start with that top one. But then all we do is subtract. So if you take your selling price of $199.90 and subtract out the cost of $175, we have a markup of $24.90. So that hopefully is easy enough. Again, just read carefully. But then it asks if our markup as a percent of selling price, this is basically telling you what to divide by. If it says markup as a percent of selling price, you're taking your markup of $24.90 and you're dividing it by your selling price. So just again, read it carefully and let it tell you what to divide by, because that's what students will struggle with. They don't know which way to divide and which one to divide by. So it's basically telling you. So my markup divided by my selling price will give me this markup as a percent of selling price, and that gives me 0.1245, or we can round that to 12.5%. Okay, then the second part says, okay, now express that markup as a percent of our cost. So again, you read it and it's telling you what to divide by. Markup divided by cost. So your markup doesn't change. Still $24.90. Now what changes is what I divide it by. Dividing it by my cost of $175. So that gives me 0.1423 or 14.2%. So then you want to be able to answer those and express them that way. You'll have one like that on your test. So to me, it's reading carefully. I mean, these formulas don't change. These formulas will be given to you. You just have to read them carefully and pay attention to whether it's cost or selling price and what the problem is asking you to do. So that is sections, Chapter 10, Section 1 and Section 2, all deal with those two formulas. You know, practice reading those and computing those.